Here we go. Metallica tier list. This will be objective. This is the objective best albums. Okay. I'm going to skip the singles because those don't really matter. I mean, like, does anyone in 2021, like, even care about singles? You can buy each individual song if you want. There's no singles. And their singles were never that relevant except that they had B-sides that were, like, cover songs. So we're going to skip this one and start with this. And Justice for All, that's an S. I don't know what you guys think about Metallica albums. Everyone's got like different opinions about where they are. I think the S ones are going to be easy, but I think people are going to get upset about when they start seeing, especially C, D, F. People are going to have opinions about it. All right, so yeah, and Justice for All is their best. It's an S. That's their best compositions. Their best performances, except for vocals. James's best vocal performance is probably Black Album or Load. But it's an okay vocal performance and it fits. I actually like the production on And Justice for All. That's controversial, but I think the production's really good and it really fits what they're doing there. So yeah, definitely best instrumental performances and best compositions are Justice for All. The other ones are singles. Death Magnetic. This one is an F. This is going to be a controversial one. Someone says everything after Cliff Burton is bad. I don't think so. I don't think so at all. Because I think their best album was after Cliff Burton. So other people will be like, well, this is actually D. I could see people thinking it's D objectively. I actually think it's F. I think it's some of their worst compositions ever. It's the worst solos that Kirk Hammett ever did were on this album right here. By far. Like, they're all chopped up pieces of other solos he did. They're really bad. And the compositions in general are really bad. There's only if you were to go riff by riff, there's good riffs on this album, but the riffs are always buried in bad songs. So if you're maybe it's like an E if you're like going riff by riff, or maybe even D because there's some A riffs, but they're in F songs. So there you go. And the production's awful. It's probably their worst production. It's completely dry. I don't know what. Who was it who did the production? The guy who always did all the guy who did all the Slayer albums. Who am I thinking of? Anyway, he did a terrible job producing this. It's one of their worst ones ever. And unfortunately, like, it made James's voice sound bad. The guitar tone is, everything about it is bad. Bad production, bad songs, bad solos, bad vocal performance, bad instrumental performances. I'd say actually Lars sounds pretty good on that one. Other than that, like, it's a decent Lars performance. Not as good as Black Album, but it's pretty good. Garage Inc. This is technically cover songs, but I'm going to put it up here. Maybe this one doesn't count and you should like leave it off the list. But it's a really good double album if you get it. The performances on it are really good across the board, at least for the new songs and the old songs. They're all really good. The production is very good for the new stuff and pretty good for the old stuff too. Pretty darn good. It's that 80s production that people like from Metallica. The only bad production would be the rehearsal takes for the Motorhead songs. They played at Lemmy's 50th birthday party, so the last songs on disc 2 are really poor production, but they weren't intended to be released. So I completely forgive them for that bad production on those 5. Otherwise, it's a really good album. Here's another thing that's cool about this album is that it gets you into a bunch of other metal because it's a bunch of cover songs, all of them good, by really, really good bands across the board. So if you've never heard Merciful Fate songs, that Merciful Fate medley is a really good medley for early Merciful Fate. Will totally get you into Merciful Fate, one of my favorite 80s bands, I guess. And really, they're still around, so they still do good stuff too. So I think Garage Inc. is an A album. Let's go to this one, Hardwired. That's a C. Hardwired would be an A, but it's 2 discs. So half the songs on it, they're batting 500. So it ends up averaging out as a C. Half the songs are just mediocre, forgettable, or like D level bad, and then the other half are decent and good. So it would be A if it were 10 songs long. It'd be A. but it's like, how many tracks is it? It's like 18 or 20 tracks. Because it's so long, it's a C. There's too much material. If they had done the load reload thing and picked 10 and really worked them up, made them better, and dropped some of the garbage, you'd probably have 2 good albums instead of 1 mediocre album. So it's C, and I'd actually put it kind of mid C. I think it's a C. Black Album's the decline. I think so too, in a number of ways. The only thing I like from Death Magnetic is Unforgiven 3, but more so because it's part of a trilogy of songs. I think that one's kind of an okay song, but I actually don't like that song very much. All right, Kill 'Em All, that's an A, and I'd actually put it here. This is a good album for a bunch of reasons. The songs on it are good. It's got a lot of great performances. The vocal performance by James, even though it's very early and he's like, he has a lot of this, trying to do this screaming tone. It doesn't really work for him. So you might knock that, but it's very much a product of like early 80s, 1983 sound. No one had done this. This was an extremely influential album on a bunch of different bands. I like the cover art too, like just the blood, the black and the white and the red looks really cool. This is really influential on a lot of other bands, including Pantera. It really made thrash metal like a big thing. And frankly, most of the songs on it are good. You have a bunch of songs by Dave Mustaine, who would go on to form Megadeth after being kicked out of the band right before recording this. And they're really good songs in general, Jump in the Fire and all those. And there's a bunch of his songs that show up. Not a bunch of his songs, but there's some of his material that shows up on the next album too. So anyway, this is a really good album. In general, it's great to listen to all the way through. It's one of those classic thrash albums, kind of like Rain in Blood, that it's a really good album to put on and listen to all the way through. Yeah, it's not flawless. Kirk Hammett puts on some really good guitar performances. His solos are really cool, and they have a great energy to them. So in general, it's a really good album. I don't know if we want to do live albums. I'll do live albums at the end. Next one's Load. Load is probably... it's a C. I think it's a C, not a B. I think it's a C. I think it's right here. But Load tends to get crapped on because the band cut their hair, and this is really like a rock album. It's much more tame than what they did before, but there's a lot of good metal on this album still. And I think the problem with this album is the same problem with Hardwired, is that there's too many songs. There's 14 songs on it, and there's 8 good ones. There's 8 really good songs. So if they'd cut 4 to 6 songs out of the album, you'd be at least a B. It'd be at least a B, if not an A. But they didn't do that. I think their philosophy, and this was the philosophy of almost every band in the 90s, was because singles were kind of going away, you put all the material on your album. Everything was on the album. There was never a time where you had... it's like, oh, well, we recorded 14 songs, we picked the best 8 because that's what fits on an album. Rather, what they did was they put every song on the album, whether it was good or bad. So you ended up with like a lot of dead tracks in 90s albums. That's just something that kind of happened along the way. So maybe you'll agree with me that maybe these are just a little too many songs. But there's some great ones on here. There's Until It Sleeps. There's like Wasting My Hate, Ate My Bitch. There's some really good songs on here that are good rock songs. Next is Lulu. Now, this is not technically a Metallica album, but it's very, very bad. It's definitely the worst thing that they've ever showed up on. It's a double album, too. It's a double album of garbage. There's not a single good song on it. There's very few any good moments. I'd say its only redeeming factors, we got the I Am the Table meme. I am the table. I am the table. I am the table. I can't believe that they recorded an entire album of this stuff. Like, it just, it boggles the mind. I guess they, who's Lou Reed? I guess they really had a lot of respect for Lou Reed to do this, but it seems like Lou Reed made a big joke of this album. It's absolutely, it's so postmodern, it's just impossible to listen to. And like Metallica plus postmodern just doesn't really work. So I'd say it's definitely the worst thing they showed up on. Technically, it's not a Metallica album, but they're the band on the entire album, so I'm going to put it in here because it's garbage. Absolutely one of the worst things I've ever heard in my entire life. Let me put it that way. Master of Puppets is easily an S. I don't think it's as good as And Justice for All, but it is very good. It's 8 very good songs. Every single song on the album is like an S tier song. Every single song on the album is worthy to be played live, is worthy to be listened to, is worthy to be learned if you're learning guitar. Same thing with And Justice for All. Every single song is good. There's 8 great songs on here. I don't need to go over too many. Virtually every song in this album has been covered by a major metal band at some point, and that's probably a good indicator that this album is among their best. Some people put it here. I think it's here. And the reason I think it's there is that it's just not as compositionally good as And Justice for All. I probably like the production on here better, but the compositions on And Justice for All are better, and the performances are better on Justice for All. But the compositions on Master Puppets are really, really good. You had another instrumental track. You've had an instrumental track on... they had instrumental tracks on like 3 albums in a row. Actually, their first 4 albums all have an instrumental track, technically. Because Kill 'Em All has that bass solo, Pulling Teeth, which is really good. So Master of Puppets had Orion. I think if you're comparing Orion to Live Is To Die, I probably will take Orion over that, but definitely every single one's a classic. Got a song about Cthulhu in there, like The Thing That Should Not Be. Good stuff. They continue to write stuff about like H.P. Lovecraft mythos, which I enjoy. All right, we're skipping EPs and singles. Reload. Reload's probably, I don't know if it's a C or a D. Some people are saying Load's a D. I think Load's a C. Reload is probably a D. It's not an F or anything. There are, again, it's the same problem as Load. But the thing is they had like 20-something songs, and they're like, okay, they picked 14 and they put them on Load, so that means they probably picked their better 14. They picked the better half and put it on Load. And then they picked the worst half and put it on Reload. There's still really good songs on Reload. There's Fuel, there's Fixer, the last track, there's like Where the Wild Things Are. These are tracks that most people don't think of because they weren't big singles at the time. Unforgiven too. There's still good songs on Reload. The Reload has this problem though that again exists on some of their other albums like Death Magnetic, where there's individual parts of songs that are like straight up S tier, and then they just are wasted. So the best example here is Better Than You. Better Than You, the first like 2 minutes of the song, the first minute and a half of the song is like pure gold. This is an awesome song. And then they go into this weird little section where James is just kind of wailing, saying, oh, no, no, no. And then like they do that for like the rest of the song. They do it for like 2/3 of the song. And it's simply an awful section. And if you were a producer, you come in and be like, okay, guys, keep this stuff that's good, this first verse and chorus stuff, and then you need to write a new part here and just scrap that garbage. It just sounds awful. It goes nowhere. It becomes annoying. You're repeating yourselves too much. It's like, but a bunch of songs on the album are that way, where like an individual part is really good and the rest of it's garbage. Like they just assembled it from parts without any deference to the quality of the parts at all, you know. So let me yeah, Welcome Home Sanitarium, that's a great track. Yeah, every single song on both these albums are really good. I think Master of Puppets is a great song. I don't think it's annoying at all. It's got a great hard hit to it. It has a cool solo. In the solo for Master of Puppets, Kurt actually pulls a string off the fretboard and makes this weird pinch harmonic pop up, and you can hear it, and he just kind of goes with it. And they thought it sounded really cool, but they could never duplicate it on another solo take, so they just kept that solo in there. Even though there's a couple mistakes in the solo, that one note made the solo, so they left it in. And I think that's kind of a cool story too. All right, moving on. So yeah, this is a D. There's good songs, but most of it is just simply not very good. I think Ride the Lightning is probably an S. You could say it's A or S. I don't think it's as good as Puppets. I don't think it's as good as Justice for All, but it's definitely an S. Again, 8 songs, all of them are good. So every single song on here really is worth listening to and worth playing. But in general, the compositional complexity is better on the next two albums, and it's just not quite as good as Master of Puppets. Every single song is good. They have that great Call of Cthulhu, has just a great atmosphere to it. Really excellent instrumental track with material from Dave Mustaine in there. Again, a lot of material left over from when Dave was in the band, and I think that helps the album to a certain degree. In general, I think it's a good album. I think it's absolutely one of these ones worth listening to all the way through. I think it's really easy to put on, Ride the Lightning. It's only 42 minutes or something, so you can just listen to the whole album in one sitting pretty easily. Kind of like Kill 'Em All, kind of like Rain and Blood by Slayer. Rain and Blood by Slayer is only like 20... It's less than 30 minutes long. I think it's 28 minutes long. All right, let's keep going. I don't know if I want to do S&M. S&M, see, S&M is such a unique album. I think even though I'm skipping live albums, I'm going to put it right here. It's a very interesting... At the time this came out, this was like a big deal because symphonic metal wasn't a thing that most people knew about, and it wasn't a thing that was mainstream, and it wasn't a thing that the less mainstream parts of metal were able to do at a high quality. So you had bands like Blind Guardian had already been around. You had bands like Manowar had already been around. Rhapsody's first album, I think, came out in 1998. And so nobody had heard of Rhapsody. I hadn't heard of Rhapsody when this album came out. So it was a really cool idea to have an orchestra and a metal band playing. I think it's probably their best live performance in general. They sound really clean in general. It's a good performance by Metallica, the band. I do feel like the orchestra just doesn't really add much to most of the songs, though. The two songs that were new, No Leaf Clover and what was the other one called? I don't remember the name of the other track. I can hear the song in my head, but I can't remember the name of it. But both of those were pretty good tracks, and those actually fit with the orchestra, I think, because they rehearsed them with the orchestra in mind and arranged them with that in mind, so it works. Otherwise, I think it's an interestingly curious album. I think it's a decent live album, but like I said, the orchestra just doesn't really add all that much to the songs, and you kind of just want to listen to the original studio versions better. But I don't know, it's a B. Let's move on. Saint Anger. That's an F. That's an F. Welcome Home Sanitary was my final project for guitar class in high school. Nice. It's got some good stuff. Yeah, sometimes a song will grow on you if you listen to it. And it's rare to find an album where everything's good. And to me, that's like an S tier album. If everything is really good, you're going to do it. I realize Black Album is not on here. No, here it is. Here's Black Album. Okay, we'll get to Black Album in a second. Yeah, Saint Anger, I mean, need more be said. It's better than Lulu. And Death Magnetic is definitely better than... Maybe Death Magnetic is here. But even here, like, if you were to pick 100 metal albums, Death Magnetic would be worse than 99 of them. There'd be one album that it might be better than. So is that E or is that still F tier? I don't know. They're pretty bad. These three albums were all recorded right in a row, by the way. So they did 3 albums in a row that were so bad they probably should have ended their career with them, right? But Saint Anger was bad across the board. No guitar solos. Really bad production. Terrible sounding guitars. That snare drum sound probably sounded cool when they were first doing it, but man, it gets on your nerves. The main thing is there's only one good song on the album. There's Frantic, which I like, and every other song I dislike. The vocal performances by James are generally bad across the board. So there's some fans, right? There's people that like Saint Anger. And to them, I'm glad Saint Anger exists. But for the rest of us, I think Saint Anger is probably going to be one of the worst Metallica albums ever made. And it's legendarily bad. Like, Load and Reload were kind of disappointments for fans in the 90s. It was nothing compared to Saint Anger. The people were like, yeah, I like Load, Reload. Saint Anger came out, they're like, this is the worst thing I've ever heard. James's vocals are comically bad. There's even, like, intonation issues. There's, his tone is awful. He's, like, got, I don't know. It's just the production is some of the worst. And the production really affects the quality of the songs, too. Because you have to imagine, it's kind of like a Bob Dylan song. You have to imagine what the band, if they actually sounded good, would sound like playing the song. But the reality is that most of the riffs are boring. They don't really work. You know, a lot of the songs are too long for the amount of material that's in them. Again, no solos. And once you take the solo thing out of it, all of a sudden the arrangements seem very simple. There's a lot of like 2-part songs in there that are still like 5 minutes long. It's just way too much. If the Beatles wrote a 2-part song, it'd be a 2.5-minute song and be a classic. Whereas Metallica takes a 2-part song, like 2 sections, like an A and a B section. They make it 5 minutes long, and it's just boring. So there you go. So I don't even have my copy of Saint Anger. I think I gave it away. I gave it away to my friend's sister years ago. I think it's like the only Metallica album I didn't hold on to after all those years. So anyway, Black Album. So we're skipping. This is already on Garage Inc. This is an EP. This is Garage Days Revisited. Black Album, I think, is a B. And I'll tell you why it's a B. So some people put it as S. They think it's an S. They think it's an A. They think it's really, really good. And if the fact is that it actually is a good album. A lot of people view it as the beginning of the decline, and that's probably accurate. But there's a lot of really good songs on the album. Again, it's 12 songs. 8 of them are good. So you have, from Black Album on, you start to have the same problem. However many songs, 8 of them are good. So you have 14 songs, 8 of them are good. You have 12 songs, 8 of them are good. You have 26 songs, 8 of them are good. So they produce, for every album cycle, they produce 8 really good songs. They should just stick to 8 songs, in my opinion, if you want to make the album good. Now, if you're one of those people that can pick out those 8 songs and just listen to those, then you're probably good. And their I guess, philosophy towards just putting everything on the album works. But anyway, Black Album's good. It's probably the best produced metal album of all time. I have not heard a metal album, and this was back in the early 90s. I haven't heard a metal album have the same level of high quality production as the Black Album. Absolutely crystal clear. The drums sound perfect. They have a great stereo array for the drums. Lars sounds like a good drummer on this album. He doesn't sound like a drummer in a good band. He sounds like a good drummer. He is a good drummer on the Black Album. His performances are, it's his best performance. I actually say his performance on Death Magnetic is really good too, of all things. But his performance on Black Album is probably his best performance. It's excellent. I actually like the drum production on Justice for All. It's very dry and you're up front in the mix. But I like it much better. It breathes so much on Black Album. The guitar tone is perfect. They're playing the same, basically the same amps, but they bring in a little bit more mid-range. It's a dual rectifier, which I have in the back. Same amp that they use for, I think, Master of Puppets On. They're using that amp. It's a really good sounding amp. Everything's in balance. The bass is nice and loud, big bass heavy mix. So the production's excellent. And then the songs are good. Very memorable songs, not just Inner Sandman. There's a reason Inner Sandman was covered by Motorhead. Motorhead won a Grammy for a cover of Inner Sandman. Think about that for a minute. Motorhead's Grammy was for covering a Metallica song. I think it was a Best Metal Performance Grammy. I think they won. If not, they got nominated. I remember that being something pretty curious. There's just so many good ones. Unforgiven, even Nothing Else Matters, which is kind of a cheesy ballad, but a lot of people like it. And you know what? It's very memorable. And I had a lot of guitar players that wanted to learn it on classical guitar because it had such a good little set of chords, and fingerstyle guitar on it was good. Same thing with Unforgiven, Through the Never, of Wolf and Man. Just a lot of great songs on there. I'd say the first half of the album is a little stronger than the second half, but in general, you're looking at really good songs. There's a couple songs that really don't age well, like Don't Tread on Me. For whatever reason, that one sounds a little bit more cheesy a couple years down the road, but most of them have aged pretty darn well. I wouldn't say there's any bad songs on the album. I'd say there's 8 great songs and then like 4 decent songs. And in general, the great songs are not as great as in their 3 best albums. So, but if you're looking at a set, their first 5 albums are really, really, really good albums. Let's see what you guys think about it. A great name for a band, Metallica. Sounds like some kind of metallic element. Yeah, Lars actually stole the name of the band. He had a friend that was going to have a magazine called Metallica, and Lars convinced him not to make that magazine, I think, so he could use the name for his band. Rhapsody's first album was Legendary Tales, 1997. I thought it was 98, though it was almost exclusively covers of Eternal Glory from their previous name, Thundercross. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I knew they were Thundercross before, but like the production, Rhapsody's symphonic production wasn't really there until probably Symphony of Enchanted Lands, and it was really there when she got to like Dawn of Victory. So when I think of symphonic metal, I'm really thinking of like Dawn of Victory and Power of the Dragon Flame. Those two albums are like some of the best symphonic metal you will ever hear. Power of the Dragon Flame in particular. If you haven't heard Power of the Dragon Flame by Rhapsody, you got to go listen to that. It's a great album. So I think Black Album, to me, B is good. You know, it might be A. You could probably make a case that it's an A, especially with the production. So I'd say it's a high B, low A. I'm gonna put it in A. I'm gonna say it's an A. Yeah. So I'm gonna call it an A. You know, I'm gonna call it an A. And so this is the final version. I'm skipping the live albums. Those don't really matter. Their best live performances, you're probably gonna find it in this album, in the live. What is it? Live Shit, Binge and Purge. They're okay. I don't think their live albums are really worth writing home to. It's better to go see them in concert. They usually put on a good live show, and they still do. But anyway, those are the studio albums. I'd say that's the tier. That's the objective tier. Anyway, let's move on. Let's play some games. And now that you've had a little bit of background to some of those, Adam Sandler's the Metallica of comedy careers. That's true. I've heard that like he makes movies based on where his family wants to take vacations now. Anyway, let's move on. Hope you guys enjoyed that little piece. Let's play some Final Fantasy V.